I think there are several ways that we might reawaken a taste for the sacred. But what we must first realize is that there's been the loss of the sacred. By that I mean there's the loss of any sense that there's anything above the physical world, that there are things which are sacred, and we use this word in a more general way, which I say when I was growing up and I was a young lad and my family became Christians, we thought of the church as being sacred. That is, there were certain things you didn't do inside the church. Now, I want to understand how I'm using the word sacred. I'm using it in that sense, as well as in a larger sense, a philosophical sense, in a theological sense. The sacred, that is, that which is not profane, that which is not common, that which is not vulgar. Those words would pretty much convey the same thing. So, in the Western's thinking today, because of the visions of reality that have discounted anything transcendent, if you have no transcendent categories, then nothing is sacred. Everything is common. Well, how might we reawaken? Well, of course, how we live our lives might be the greatest apologetic to reawaken the sense in others. How does a life look when it lives in light of the sacred? But then we could reawaken the sense of the sacred in our architecture. Now, I know when I start talking like this, people get a little nervous. They think, well, what do you mean? Well, before there was the digital world, the internet, and all of this, architecture was the most powerful art in the world. So I would say any of the arts would be a great way of reawakening the sense of the sacred. So when we build a building, only when we build a building, I'm not talking about buying a building, a church has to buy a building, and okay, that's one thing. But we intentionally build a place where God's people are going to meet on Sunday, that building architecturally ought to say something that points beyond itself. Now, I know we don't give a lot of thought to it, and there are certain groups, Christian groups, that do, but the majority of evangelical Christians think, the building is only functional. And I say, well, it is not only functional. The building ought to speak, the architecture, whatever way you want to talk about it, the architecture ought to point to something beyond itself, which most architecture today doesn't do. In the arts, we talk about it could be done through painting. It could be done through film. So there are many ways that we could do it, but we then would have to retrain some of our artists and to realize that as a Christian, your first endeavor is not to be evangelistic. Your first endeavor is to be faithful to Christ and His view of reality. And if you do that, then I believe your art will be evangelistic, something like a Bach, for example, in the music. So those are ways I think could be certainly ways to reawaken this sense of the sacred.